This episode contains descriptions of domestic violence and gun violence. Listener discretion is advised. If you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence, call 1-800-799-SAFE or 1-800-799-7233. You can also find resources at thehotline.org.
He just liked guns, and I just didn't think much about him.
Anne was born and raised in Linden, Alabama, and still lives there today. If you're from a small town, you know that to meet anybody new, you have to go somewhere a few towns over. How did you meet Jimmy?
Okay. My friends and I went to a place in another town about 50 miles away. We went to a bar. He came and sat down by me in the booth we had, and I spilled a beer on him.
On purpose?
No. I just apologized. And anyway, we got to know each other that way, and he was a super nice guy, and we saw each other kind of frequently for a while. And well, then I knew I didn't want to lead his life because it was not the type of life I needed to lead, because I had a son that was only about 2 years old.
Mm-hmm. What kind of a life was he leading?
Well, I know he was into drugs. I never saw it, but I know he was. And he wasn't a very ambitious person. And I wanted more for my child than that. So I kind of drifted away from him.
So Anne went on and lived a whole life.
I was married to my son's father and remarried someone that it was still not a good marriage. And years went on, and I was married for my third time, as much as I hate to say it. And I had gotten pregnant, and I lost the baby. And I went through major baby blues because I didn't have a baby, but I had baby blues. So it was really bad. I went through a lot of depression.
She ended up getting divorced again. So Anne wasn't in a great space in 1997. But people have a funny way of coming back into your life at just the wrong time, including Jimmy.
Of course, I read a lot of things in the paper that he had done. He had held a girl captive and, I don't know, shot her up with some drugs or something. And I'm sitting here thinking, I said, that's not the Jimmy I remember. I'm the type of person, not anymore, but back then, I want to fix people. You know, I want to help them and fix them. And I went and talked to his sister one day, and she told me, she said, yeah, give him a call. She said he thinks everyone hates him. So I called him, and he invited me to come over one night.
You had read that thing in the paper about Jimmy, and did you call his sister to be like, what's going on?
Yeah, and she never came out and said, yes, he did that. And, you know, I don't know. I just didn't want to believe it.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, he tells me a tall tale, and I remarked to him, well, if you ever physically hurt me, you will pay.
This is Live to Tell, the podcast where I talk to some of the bravest people who have been through the most horrifying things and lived to tell the tale. I'm Caitlin Van Mall.
He was at his mother's. He lived there because he was under house arrest. Warning, but...
Yeah, did you see that he had the ankle monitor the first time?
Yes.
And what did he say about it?
All those charges were that he was a former felon for possessing stolen property. And felons, they are not allowed to have weapons.
Mm-hmm. Right. And did he explain that to you?
No, I knew that. That was in the paper also.
Yeah, what did you guys do that first
Well, when I got there, he was all nice, dressed, neat and clean. We just sat and talked. His mother was in there most of the time, and I felt decent about it, and it wasn't anything really big. We just sat and talked like friends.
Hmm. Did you go into reconnecting with him intending to be friends or maybe sparking something romantic, or what were your intentions?
Well, at first it was just friends.
Mhm.
And then he got to discussing, he said, when we were together the last time, you just kind of disappeared. I said, yeah, I did. I thought it was for the best. And then things became more romantic.
Mhm. What did you like about him?
I've always been attracted to bad boys. That's a terrible thing to say. But, and he was strong. He treated me with respect.
Mhm. While she wanted a good bad boy, the bad bad boy started to show himself.
I had those red flags, but I didn't see them
Mhm.
as much. Like, he'd given me a ring to wear, and we were making hamburgers one night, and I took it off and I laid it on the table because I didn't want to get hamburger meat in it. And he took a knife and stabbed it through the middle of the ring. And he told me, don't ever take that ring off. I said, well, I didn't want to get
No.
hamburger meat on it, and I thought back then that was him showing me that he cared for me.
So Anne kept seeing him, but finally reached the point where she couldn't ignore the red flags any longer.
I can't tell you for sure, but I can tell you for sure that there were some drugs involved. I never saw it, but I know it happened. Because one night, pulled up to his house, I went in to look for him, and he jumped out from behind the boat and had a gun pointed at me. And I said, well, this is it. I'm not coming back.
Yeah. Why did he do
I
that?
don't know. And I thought to myself, all that was going through my head was, I can't let him know I'm scared.
Uh-huh. How did you get out of that?
Well, he thought I wasn't scared. And he said, I'm just picking at you.
Anne told Jimmy she had to go and said she would come back another time. She wanted to keep the promise that she would come back, but she also decided that would be the end of their relationship.
I pulled up that night and I could tell he was intoxicated.
Hmm.
He was outside grilling something and he was talking on the phone. So I just went in and sat down. I was not feeling real good. And I sat on the couch and I said, I really want to go home. So I went outside and I told him, well, it was the wrong thing to say because he cuffed me across the face. And it was so hard that it knocked me up against the outside wall. And he shot a pistol by my left ear and made me go back in the house. And I'm sitting there on the couch and I'm thinking, those stories that I read in the newspaper, they were true. And I'm in danger. He went into the attic to put the guns up or to get one down. Well, I ran out the side door. It was in the country, and there was a house behind him, but there was a fence there. There was a house up on the hill, but I didn't see any lights on. But I made the worst decision in the world and ran back in front of the house, trying to get to another place around the corner.
Anne had run out of the house without her purse, which had her keys inside. So getting into her car and driving away wasn't an option.
He came out on the porch and he told me to stop, and I didn't. The next thing I felt was like fire going through my body. He shot me with a shotgun that had buckshot in it, and buckshot spreads. And I was hit in 5 different places. And I hit the ground on my back, and I screamed. He came over and drugged me back. Drugged me. I got up some, I'd fall. I got up some, I'd fall. I had little scars on my wrist where gravel got in my skin. And he got me back in the house, and I sat on the couch. And then he went back up into the attic again to put the gun up that he'd shot me with. And I grabbed the phone, called 911, and it went to another county. I don't know why, but they transferred me to the county that it happened in. And then he came in and took the phone away from me. And the 911 people called back. Well, he told them nothing was wrong. And then they called back again, and I had to tell them nothing was wrong. But I hold that against them too, because no one ever came out to check.
With no help on the way, Ann was at Jimmy's mercy.
He forced me to get in the shower, and it was horrendous. The water beating down on my wounds. That's probably one of the biggest pains that I remember. Of course, getting shot was kind of strange. It was like, I heard it before it hit me. And I just felt pain, and I didn't know where all the pain was. But the shower was, I don't know, it was just really bad. And then I laid in the bed, the towel up under me, and I begged for my life for about 3 hours.
God.
And the whole time I was thinking, what is my son going to do without me? He was 16 years old at the time. And I prayed. I prayed laying there in that bed while I was begging to go to the hospital. I said, God, just let me live for Brooks. That's my son's name. That was my whole determination of living. His father didn't have anything to do with him. So all he'd known was me and my mother as nurturers all his life. I'm thinking the whole time, what is he going to do without me?
Meanwhile, Jimmy was doing laundry.
Actually, he washed my clothes. I don't understand some of the things that he did. I will tell you this could have ended my life right then and there. He left a pistol on the bed when he went to do whatever he did with my clothes. And when he came back, I had it pointed at him. And then didn't know it, but he had one with him. And he had it pointed back at me. And I'm thinking to myself, I said, I don't even know how to use a gun. So I could never do this. So I laid it down and I begged. I said, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it, But he was just going back and forth. I don't know what I was doing. And things were getting, like I said, very hazy. I do know he tried to call his mother. And he couldn't get her.
Then Jimmy made another call.
He made me get up, went outside. I sat in my car. I kind of sat sideways because I didn't want to get blood all in the car. And I didn't know who it was he called. And he told me, he said, if you tell him what happened, he'll finish the job. And so I was leery of that. But when he got there, I knew him very well. And he's a very nice guy. And I knew he would side with me.
It was Ann's old friend, Steve.
Jimmy had told him to take me 100 miles away to a hospital, but I knew I wouldn't make it.
Why do you think he let you go?
I don't know. Other than he didn't want me to die in that house, in his mother's house. I really don't know.
Steve and Ann both knew Ann wouldn't make it the 100 miles to the Montgomery hospital.
And I told him to take me to the nearest place. I told him, I said, I don't want you involved in this. And he argued with me about it, of course. And I said, no, this was my problem.
Why didn't you want him to be involved?
I was just so thankful that he came to get me, that I didn't want the burden. I don't like to burden people. You know, I'm a very independent woman. I just want to, if at all possible, I want to handle things myself. And I am a type A personality. I like to be in charge. But this guy was kind of, he was scared, and I don't blame him, but he got a wheelchair that was sitting there at the door. He said, "Are you sure?" He kept going, "Are you sure?" I said, "I'm fine now. I'm at the hospital." And I pushed the buzzer, and he went ahead and left. And it wasn't just a second. They had seen us pull up, and a nurse was there. And I handed the nurse my purse, and I told her, I said, "It's got all my information in it, insurance, everything." I gave her my sister's name and phone number, and was wheeled back to triage.
Anne wasn't conscious long, but she sure as hell was going to let it be known who did this to her.
I remember a deputy sheriff standing over me, and I remember he had a mustache. That's all I remember about him. And I told him who it was, and I tried to explain, and they finally figured out who it was. And I told him, I said, "He's armed and dangerous." That's the last thing I remember for 2 weeks.
Jimmy was arrested the next morning. We'll be right back.
Evidently, they had given me enough, whatever, morphine, I don't know what it was, that I don't remember them putting in the chest tubes.
A chest tube is meant to drain fluid from the chest so your lungs have space to fully expand. They insert the tube through a 1-inch incision between the ribs.
And I do know they do not deaden you. They have to force them in you. My sister was outside, and she heard me scream, but I don't remember it.
Yeah, well, it's probably for the best.
Yes.
You don't remember.
Yeah, there's probably a lot of things I don't remember.
While Anne was out, doctors worked on finding all the shotgun pellets in her body. A shotgun fires a spray of pellets, so it was hard to determine how many had hit her, and how they went about finding them is, to be honest, kind of gross.
They filleted me from my breastplate below my belly button because they didn't know where the buckshots were.
On the front?
Yes, the front.
But you were shot in the back, right?
Yeah, but it goes through.
Okay.
They found a buckshot floating in my pelvic area. My liver was damaged, which they told my sister that it would regenerate, and it did. Anyway, for a week went by. I'm still on a ventilator, but I still was not breathing on my own.
Mm-hmm.
So the nurse came out and told my sister and brother-in-law, they were there, that they were going to have to go back in and find out why I was not breathing on my own. So here they go. They cut me back open, and they find out my diaphragm is damaged.
She may not remember any of those 2 weeks, but she was conscious and kept trying to pull all her various tubes out so much, they had to tie her arms down. After they repaired her diaphragm, she could breathe on her own. But removing the ventilator with her arms tied was not a smooth process.
When they took me from the radiology table, whatever it's called, to put me back on my stretcher, they have the poles at the end of the beds where they hang IV drips and whatever. Well, my vent tube got wrapped around one of those, and it broke. So I could not breathe at all because I had this vent down my throat, and there was no air coming in. Well, my hands are still tied down. And I hate to say this, I don't know what other word to say, throwing up the vent. And they were all looking at me, and this nurse is forcing it back in my mouth. And I couldn't show them down at the end of the bed where it was broken. And finally, thank the Lord, someone looked down there and saw it. And they said, let it come up. So that's how I got rid of my vent.
Once Anne was really improving, they moved her to a sub-intensive care unit, and there was one thing she really wanted to do.
The next morning, I told the nurses, I said, I want a shower. No one helped me. I knew I tried to wash my hair with soap even. But when I got out of the shower, I looked in the mirror. It looked like I had stuck my finger in an electrical outlet. No one had combed my hair. And it was just horrible. I brushed, and I was so weak, and I brushed and I brushed. So finally, the next day, they moved me to a regular room. And one sweet dear nurse, she asked me, she said, do you want me to shave your legs? And I said, would you please? And that, I was young enough then that I actually had a lot of hair to shave.
Then Anne's best friend, Vicky, came for what could have been a long visit.
She came up and she gave me all kinds of little presents and stuff. And she spent the night that night. That recliner made out into bed. I don't know how she slept on it, but she said she told her husband, she said, I'm not leaving until she comes home. The next day, though, the doctor came in and he told me, he said, you finished that lunch. I was on a solid foods by then. He said, I'll let you go home. And then he reached up to my nose and jerked the feeding tube out. That was painful. That was very painful. And I said, you didn't tell me you were going to do that. He said, exactly. Because he didn't want me to fear that.
I
know, but still, I was in the position that I couldn't argue with anyone. I didn't have the strength or anything,
Yeah.
So there was my lunch sitting there. I couldn't eat. All I wanted was ice chips. My friend had just gone down to eat lunch. So when she came back, she was full. And I said, Vicky, you got to help me eat this. And she said, I can't. But she tried. She tried to eat a lot of it. Then she went and flushed some down the toilet. And she stuffed some in her suitcase. She said, you're going home today.
So, she's like, I can't spend another night in that recliner.
I know. Yeah, pretty much.
She stayed at her sister's house for just a few days, then went home, where she had to work hard to get her strength back.
I knew I had to start walking, to some extent. So my first trip was I walked to where I am now. I'm only a block from my house. And this is where my best friend lived before her daughter got it and she moved somewhere else. But anyway, it's a long story about that. We're not going to worry about that. But I said I can walk to Pam's house. And I said, if I can't turn around and walk back, I can stop there, and rest for a while. Mm-hmm. So I just started walking little by little every day. And it was just time, but I knew I could not lay around, that I had to get up and move. My son was 16 years old, mm-hmm. and he played 3 sports, and there were things I needed to do,
Yeah.
I had to keep up with him.
How did you talk to him about what happened?
He really won't talk about it to this day. He hasn't read the book.
Anne wrote a book with journalist M. William Phelps called She Survived, Anne.
He won't read it. He saw me in the hospital and he couldn't stand it, the way he saw me. I was still unconscious at the time. The night it happened, he cried crocodile tears and said he was going to kill him. Now, this is Mr. Macho Jock guy. I'm 5'3" and he's 6 foot. Don't ask me how that happened, but thank goodness he couldn't remember how to get there. He'd been there one time. I don't know, but we don't discuss it. We don't talk about it, still to this day.
Anne continued to improve and eventually went back to work. Then one day, she received an out-of-the-blue phone call from Jimmy's mom, of all people.
She called me and wanted to meet for lunch. So I immediately turned around and I called the assistant DA that was handling my case and told him what was happening, what she'd done. He said, go. He said, I'm going to come over there the day that you're meeting. You know, I told him he could wait at my office. And then my chief of police came up and he was there with him. Well, I went and I waited on her, and I was a little nervous about it, truthfully.
Yeah, I
You
imagine.
know, even though we were in a public place, I still wouldn't have, wanted to trust her that much.
Yeah. Did they have anyone like at the place?
No,
Like a
no.
cop or?
Well, actually, the police department was right next door to the
Oh,
restaurant we were going to eat at. Yes. So, that wouldn't have been a problem. If I'd have had a problem with her, I would have called someone.
yeah.
But she didn't show up within the amount of time that I thought she should have been there.
Right.
And I left, but I have a feeling she was going to try to pay me off.
Oh.
I really do. No amount of money doesn't matter. You ever physically hurt me, you'll pay. And I meant it.
It took 2 years for Jimmy to stand trial for what he did to Anne. To quickly recap Jimmy's legal journey, he had already been convicted of a felony. Then, he allegedly attacked this other woman, and the cops found that Jimmy had guns, which, as a felon, he is not allowed to have. The woman dropped her charges, but Jimmy still had to face federal charges for the guns. He was given an ankle monitor and kept under house arrest. Then he shot Anne. He had to face trial for the gun charges first, he was found guilty, and then went to trial for shooting Anne. Anne's case was assigned to Assistant District Attorney Robert Henry.
Super great guy. I probably would have never gotten a conviction if it hadn't been for him.
Why?
It was my word against his word.
Well, and Steve.
Well, he didn't see it happen, though. It's hearsay. He knew I had been shot, but Jimmy had told him I had stopped to help a stranded motorist, and they did it. And why I drove to his house and not a hospital, I don't know. That was what he told him. And then my story was totally different.
Well, yeah, even though they found all those guns.
But they didn't find that gun because his mother had someone come and get that gun, and it was taken totally apart, and it was buried up under her trailer.
I feel obligated to say allegedly.
I found this out from her daughter, Jimmy's sister, years ago too. So they didn't find that gun. And I don't think they found any guns because that person had gotten them before the deputies got there and everything. So he was clean. But they did find shotgun shells on the front porch. That's where he shot me from.
You would think an attempted murder trial would be exciting, but apparently not.
It was a trial that the judge fell asleep in. This was kangaroo court.
During which part did he fall asleep?
During my testimony. Yes. My sister was watching closely, and she said, Anne, I don't know what's going on. But the court reporter, she said, she doesn't know what she's doing. I said, you don't think so? She said, no.
Well, what did she see?
She just, the way that the woman was acting. And I don't know, my sister picked up on it. The jury deliberated. It was probably about 2 hours. So I said, they've got someone that is fighting it. But they came back and they found him guilty of assault in the second degree. He was charged with the first degree assault. They found him guilty of second degree assault.
The difference between first and second degree assault in this case would be if Jimmy intended to cause Anne serious physical injury, which would be assault 1, or just a regular amount of physical injury, which would be assault 2. So the jury didn't find Anne's injuries to be quote-unquote serious enough for assault 1.
And when the judge polled the jury, there was one woman that was hesitant, but she said yes. I don't know. I can't prove it. But they got to her. They got to that one woman that was on that jury.
Jimmy was definitely going to prison. All that needed to be decided now was for how long. Unbeknownst to Anne, her district attorney had left the office to start a private practice, and she was assigned to someone else.
One day when I was at work, another assistant district attorney called and said, told me that they were doing Jimmy's sentencing that day, that I needed to get there. I said, what time? He said, in an hour.
Well, thank you for the notice.
And I said, excuse me? He said, I just found out myself. And, it's the rights of a victim to be able to be present for the sentencing. I told him, I said, I'm the only one here at the office. They would have to send someone from Selma. There's no way I can get there in time. So I wasn't there for the sentencing. And he sentenced him to 10 years. He could have gotten 20. That was the most he could have gotten for second-degree assault. Mm-hmm. So he already had the 10 from the federal, and then he had 10 from me. Then one day, about 6 months later, my assistant district attorney was back. He came back, called me and told me, he said they've lost the transcript to the trial. They didn't lose the transcript. My sister was right. That woman didn't know what she was doing. He brought me over there to talk to him. He said, they want you to accept time served. And I said, no. I said, we're going back to trial. And he said, I'm glad you said that. So here we go again. We have a second trial.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. But with a whole new jury. But they could not charge him more than he got the time before.
The jury found him guilty again.
Had his sentencing right after the trial. Couldn't sentence him to more than he'd gotten before. So he got the same thing again. About, 2 years later or something like that, the parole officer for my county, because I was the victim, he called me and said that he was going to be released on such and such a date. I said, he got 10 years. And I said, I know he got some time served, but still, he said, oh, that's what you call the good time law. In the state of Alabama, if the prisoner acts right, does right, doesn't have any problems, he only had to serve a third of his time, which was 3 years, 3 months, and 3 days. That's what he served for trying to kill me.
And even with his reduced time, Jimmy wasn't going to be free right away. After serving time for shooting Anne, Jimmy went straight to federal prison to serve his 10-year sentence for the gun charges. He has since been released. While Anne in no way deserved to get shot, she did feel responsible for what happened to her.
It is my stupidity, and for the longest time, I blamed myself. And till I came to realize, Anne, you didn't do it. I did nothing to cause it. I was never ugly.
You gave this man a chance.
Right.
And like his sister said, he needed a friend.
Yes.
You were trying to be a friend.
Exactly. I shouldn't have gone back to end it. I should have just done it over the phone. But I did go back.
I mean, you had reasons to believe that he could be dangerous, yes, but you also had reasons to believe that it would be fine, because it had been.
Right.
So, because it ended badly, as it's, hindsight's 2020.
Yes, definitely. And this is another thing that I want people to remember. Mm-hmm. Don't classify domestic violence victims. Some people say, oh, they're poor. Well, I wasn't rich, but I was came from a middle class, law enforcement family. They're uneducated. No, I have a college degree. They do drugs. No, I didn't do drugs. And 1 in 4 women are victims of domestic violence. 1 in 4. Of course, a lot of them are silent.
Mm-hmm.
I learned a lot working with, it was called Harriet's House, which was a home for abused women. And I did a lot of speaking engagements with them, and I learned a lot from them about signs to look for. If you are a victim of domestic violence, there are ways out. Sometimes I know it may be difficult because you may be the wife of a police officer, but there's someone somewhere that can help you. Don't give up and don't give in.
When she was ready, Anne cautiously entered the dating pool again.
Gosh, I don't know how long it was before I had my first date. After that, and the first thing I would ask them is, do you have a gun? Do you like guns? And then the second thing I would do is I would tell them my story. Because I wanted to let them know that if they cared enough about me to date me, then that wouldn't bother them.
Then she met Tom. Or re-met Tom.
Known each other for years. Well, I've known of him. He's 2 years younger than me. I remember seeing, that I thought he was just cute as a button, and he always smiled and always had a wave, he waved and everything. And he friended me on Facebook, and I had gone to college with his sister. We were fairly close friends in college, and so I asked about her, and that's how it all got started. He was in Missouri.
Oh.
We talked and talked and talked and talked, and one day he was in Alabama, and about 6 months later we got married.
Oh, wow.
Been married 11 years now.
Oh, congrats.
Thank you. Longest I've ever done it. I know. That's the only problem in my life has been men, but I can deal with this one.
This is Live to Tell. I'm Caitlin Van Mall. You can follow the show on Instagram and TikTok at Live to Tell Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please rate, review, and subscribe. It really helps the show. I'll see you in 2 weeks.